81 people.
Meeting is being recorded.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the 15th of March, 2023. This is the Landmarks Land Use Committee, Community Board to Brooklyn. And we like to thank my co-chair, Dr. Kostofan, and most important is Karen Johnson, our secretary, who will be taking minutes. She'll be up till 7 o'clock, she's told me. So we'll try to see if we can do this as soon as possible, as much as we can to accommodate her. And I'm Carlton Report. First, we'll just ask for the, if there's no objection, I'd like to approve the agenda that was sent out by Taya.
So moved.
Thank you. There's no objection. The agenda has been adopted. And next for the minutes, we have to again ask if there's no objection to adopt the minutes from the February Landmarks Land Use Committee meeting.
So
Hearing
moved.
no objection. Thank you. Hearing no objection, the minutes for the February meeting of Landmarks Land Use have been adopted. Okay. Next, oh yes, we have to give our the public a chance. Now, if there's any non-board member, non-committee member who wishes to make a comment on the agenda, this is your opportunity. I'll give a moment to allow any non-board member, non-committee member an opportunity to, member of the public to make any statement they have concerning our agenda. I hear no anyone from the non-board or non-committee member, so we're going to move on now onto our agenda. And yes, we have here another, another edition or another one of our upcoming program for eds and meds. This is work that's being done by New York City Department of City Planning, and they're working with both the Brooklyn Hospital Center and Long Island University, which are just right by each other over on Ashland Place. And one of the things that I did want to ask, I'll ask City, I don't know if City Planning anybody knows, but if they can answer one thing I have, not concerned, but I noticed that there's a new construction that's going up right along Ashland, right near the Willoughby Street, and it considers that area that's apparently right behind the medical office building at Willoughby Street. It's a new construction that looks like it's about 10 or 12 stories. If anyone has any comment upon the work that's being done there, as part of what you're presenting, please do so. We'd like to thank from the Department of City Planning, Amitha Manish, and Connie Chan and Alex Sommer. And I think if I missed up, and I think that, Sagi Get Golan. I think I really mangled some names, so please forgive me on that. And go ahead, Department of City Planning, for your eds and meds presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to the full community board here for having us back again. My name is Alex Sommer with the Brooklyn office of the New York City Department of City Planning, joined by Amrita Mahesh, who's going to lead the presentation tonight, and Bianca Bryant, who's been helping work on this as well. And we have a few others that may be joining later on through the conversation. I just want to say thank you again. This is the third time we've come out to the community board on this topic. Came out in November of last year, January of this year, and then this is the third time. We anticipate coming back as many times as you'll have us as well. we just wanted to make sure we touch base on a set of high-level goals and policies that we've been working on before we go to the City Planning Commission. I know this is a little bit of an unusual process that may be unfamiliar with. Usually we have a ULURP project and we present, or the private applicants present. I just want to note that this is very, very different than that traditional process. We're actually coming out pretty early to talk through the thought process that's been going on and developing the framework as part of the last few months of work. And I'll pass it over to Amritha, but I just want to note that this is really early on in the stages, and we hope to have continued discussions over the long term. So I'll pass it over to Amritha. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you,
Just give me
and
one
thank you,
moment.
Amritha.
Thank you. I'm just going to
Go
share
ahead.
my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. So
Yes.
Thank you again for having us today. We're very happy to be here to share an update on the EDS and MEDS framework. You may notice a change on this title slide, the addition of Fort Greene to the study name that we've used in the past. This is in response to feedback during our stakeholder outreach to have the study name be reflective of portions of the focus areas east of Flatbush Avenue that are within the Fort Greene community. Today's presentation is a near final draft of what we intend to present to the City Planning Commission on March 27th. And we are here to reintroduce this work and share a preview of the recommendations and get additional feedback in advance of this upcoming CPC milestone. This is a 90+ slide version, the entire version, and it includes some content that we've shared with you all at prior meetings, and also includes a lot of new content. In the interest of time, we would like to walk through select slides with new information and some of the forward-looking recommendations, and we welcome your feedback on the entirety of this document, which we'll be sharing shortly after this meeting. Before we dive in, I also want to note that we're still working on the affordable housing income bands data for the years 2004 onwards. This was requested previously by CB2 members. We're continuing to encounter some data source issues for the early 2000s, and we'll need more time to kind of parse through this together with HPD and really look through the older data sets and provide a more reliable summary of information. So we hope to get back to you as soon as we can, and it's still very much on our radar. And we also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we heard loud and clear questions regarding implementation and actionable next steps for the framework at the meeting in January. And we have some initial responses at this early stage, but we would be happy to discuss this aspect and related considerations during the Q&A. This framework at its core is intended to be a policy document to guide DCP's future work with private institutions and partner agencies. It's a vision for the area's continued growth as a vibrant 24/7 mixed-use neighborhood with thriving businesses, institutions, and more opportunities for housing. We also want to take a moment to talk about the purpose and intent of this work. Through this effort, we're hoping to proactively plan with our partner agencies to develop high-level planning goals and identify synergies, ensure that the anticipated growth is put in the context of the planning and infrastructure needs for the broader neighborhood, engage in planning very far in advance of any work that will be done by the city or private parties in the future. And we've also tried to incorporate key data and research in this deck that we hope can serve as a tool for community residents and local organizations. We also want to emphasize that this does not replace or supersede any necessary community engagement that will be forthcoming, and we really see this as the first step in the process. A quick reminder of the context area and the impetus for this work. As Alex mentioned, the LIU and Brooklyn Hospital campuses that are located between Flatbush Avenue and Fort Greene Park are considering a long-term redevelopment plans to expand and modernize their facilities over time, and including an opportunity for mix of uses and housing. Their long-term plans really have the potential to be impactful for them as well as the surrounding communities. And it really provides the impetus for the city to think comprehensively about these two campuses and considers their growth in the context of planning objectives for the greater downtown Brooklyn Central Business District, which includes the surrounding job hubs, Dumbo, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and also paying particular attention to the surrounding NYCHA communities. The Department of City Planning is putting forth this framework to really shape this expected growth on the east side of Flatbush Avenue. A quick refresher on the overarching goals. We're hoping to help these two institutions grow by helping them kind of advance their proposals to create new and expanded facilities, services, programs, and jobs, continue to strengthen the downtown Brooklyn CBD, and provide guidance for private and public investments in the area, build on ongoing recovery efforts, and better connect Brooklyn residents to jobs in the neighborhood. And as mentioned at the beginning, the framework recommendations are really meant to inform planning that we're doing now, but also will inform future work with our partner agencies and the private institutions. For this framework, this slide actually just acknowledges the folks that we've worked with so far, our agency partners, and we've also held some preliminary outreach meetings with Community Board 2, NYCHA Resident Association leadership, LIU Brooklyn Hospital representatives, as well as elected officials. And also a quick reminder of the focus areas. We have a few different scales that we're thinking of, so I just want to take a moment to kind of walk through this. First, what we're calling the Greater Central Business District area, which includes downtown Brooklyn and the neighboring job centers in this ecosystem, including Dumbo and the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We're considering the needs of the downtown Brooklyn core area, and by this we mean roughly the area of the special district. The areas east of Flatbush Avenue and along the Ashland Place Navy Street corridor, which connects some important neighborhood nodes from Atlantic Terminal in the south to Navy Yard to the north. And we will also be looking at the 3 public housing communities, NYCHA's Farragut, Ingersoll, and Whitman houses. And lastly, we also want to make sure that we're considering downtown Brooklyn's regional significance. It is the largest central business district outside of Manhattan, and the CBD's position in the region and the city is something that is a very important scale to consider as well. This is also a slide that we've shared previously, but again, as a reminder, noting that we've tried to include both place-based and programmatic recommendations. So place-based recommendations are meant for a specific site or area, and programmatic recommendations are broader and they touch on a range of topics and neighborhood needs. The framework recommendations will include land use and urban design principles that are largely focused on the LIU and Brooklyn Hospital campuses and immediate vicinity. But we're also keeping in mind the needs of the larger neighborhood when it comes to the other topics such as city-owned assets, public realm and transit needs, strengthening connections to NYCHA communities, current and future infrastructure, public health, housing, and jobs needs. This slide is also one that we've shared previously, and we hope to get into more detail about these land use and urban design principles today. But the overall themes are pretty consistent. It is about addressing site-specific conditions, coordination needs across the 2 sites, and recommendations for improving connectivity in the public realm. The principles are really informed by how these 2 sites are situated within the context of the larger neighborhood. There are some key east-west corridors that are shown here in yellow and north-south corridors shown here in blue. We really want to be mindful of the characteristics of each of these surrounding streets, the role that they play in the broader network, and ensure that the planned developments are responsive to these frontages. Fort Greene Park on the easternmost edge is a frontage that is of particular importance and needs to be thoughtfully planned. The image on the left shows existing conditions and highlights this interface with the park. We've also included some historic images of the park that shows the western condition. And we are coordinating very closely with the Parks Department and partner agencies to plan for this prominent frontage. Here we have the typical sidewalk and streetscape condition along other frontages of the park that consists of the stone masonry wall, the hex pavers, and street trees. And it's really important to keep in mind how the rest of the park perimeter is, and when thinking about how this western edge condition can be conceived in the future. Now we're transitioning to some newer content, which we would love your feedback on. So first, we have some site planning principles for the two campuses. To improve north-south connectivity, we're suggesting opening up Hudson Avenue to break down the scale of these superblocks, which is shown here in the number 1. Connecting Willoughby Street to DeKalb Avenue through a new publicly accessible connection within the Brooklyn Hospital property along the park. Again, as mentioned in the previous slide, this would require careful coordination and a very thoughtful approach, coordination with our partner agencies as well as with the private institution, Brooklyn Hospital. There are opportunities to explore enhancing east-west connectivity across both sites, and this can be through physical connections or visual connections, supporting the creation of new open space and identifying opportunities at optimal locations within these campuses informed by the proposed uses and the operational needs of these types of institutional buildings. The campuses also do share lot lines on the corner of DeKalb Avenue and Ashland Place. And here we believe it's really important to maintain sufficient setbacks and clearances between the proposed developments. And we also want to ensure strong street walls at key frontages so buildings can have a better relationship with the streetscape, but also allow for flexibility where it would be appropriate, such as at corners, where perhaps buildings can kind of peel back and create open space or add to the pedestrian circulation network. We want to encourage high quality urban design while accounting for key site planning considerations that are typically factored in for these types of institutional buildings and mixed use developments. We want to look at how to facilitate a mix of uses within a building or across multiple buildings, consider spatial needs and best practices for aspects such as floor plate sizes, floor to ceiling heights, balance operational needs, mechanical, logistical aspects, and of course, open space and site circulation as well, promoting opportunities for open space ranging from publicly accessible space to rooftop or outdoor recreation space that's more private for students, workers, and residents. We want to support a balanced mix of uses across the two institutions. We believe that there is an opportunity for a more enhanced mix of uses closer to Flatbush Avenue, which can have a more robust presence of non-residential uses, perhaps to really enliven this frontage and relate to this important major thoroughfare. Moving east, supporting the expansion of educational and healthcare space at the mid-block portions of the campuses, along with opportunities for housing. And on the eastern edge, really looking at tailoring the uses to suit the park adjacency along Fort Greene Park. And based on research that we've done on recent development trends and needs in the neighborhood, we want to explore opportunities for really flexible spaces and fit out spaces for office, healthcare, education, retail, entertainment, and food service uses, incorporating retail in a variety of sizes, identifying opportunities for community uses, creating new housing, including income-restricted housing, and really supporting institutional growth by creating step-out space and other specialized spaces. And by this, we mean learning spaces, incubators, medical offices, and labs, etc. We want to promote thoughtful urban design and massing strategies for proposed developments. This slide illustratively shows the principle of stepping up towards Flatbush Avenue, which is a major thoroughfare along which a lot of growth has occurred, and stepping down towards the important Fort Greene Park frontage. We also want to encourage strategies such as setting back or chamfering the corners, as described previously, to allow for views to the Fort Greene Park Monument along Willoughby Street. We think developments should pay particular attention to the design of the ground floors and ensure vibrancy and activation at the street level, and incorporate retail or neighborhood services along key streets. Where there are sidewalk constraints, setting back buildings to create wider, more generous sidewalks that can allow for circulation, street trees, seating, green infrastructure, things like that are also an important site planning principle. Future development should consider how they relate to the surrounding context, whether it's existing buildings or recent developments, and be particularly mindful of how they interact with the public realm. This slide shows some examples of typical design tools that can aid in building design to be responsive to the surrounding context. The next topic is opportunities at city-owned properties. The first example that we have here is University Place, which we mentioned at our prior meeting as well. We are looking to work with Parks Department and LIU to really re-envision this open space as a major gateway along this important Flatbush Avenue corridor. And the goal is to really be, this goal is also responsive to the Community District Needs Statement, which requests public ground improvements for University Place. The second city-owned property that we would like to review is the Fort Greene Health Clinic across from University Place. We are working with DOHMH to better understand their long-term needs at this important public facility. We understand that this serves not just residents in the neighborhood, but also from across the city, given its location in a really transit-rich area. So we're looking for ways to support these existing services and potentially expand future services. We also want to explore opportunities for co-location within planned growth at these anchor institutions, given that there is also a strong programmatic connection between a health clinic use, nursing and pharmacy and educational programs, as well as the hospital. And we really want to support the clustering of the health clinic use with other nonprofit service providers, which we understand to be a successful model for healthcare ecosystems. Moving further north, we would also like to work with our partner agencies to look at future opportunities at the Health and Hospitals Gotham Clinic site on Block 2088 between Park Avenue and Auburn Place, surrounded by the neighboring NYCHA Ingersoll and Whitman houses. This block has multiple active and important city services, including a health clinic, schools, a library, a family shelter, and supportive services. We are identifying the Cumberland Clinic as an opportunity site and would need to study this further together with Health and Hospitals and other partner agencies. The next topic is public realm and connectivity. As noted previously, we would really like to pay particular attention to this Ashland Place Navy Street corridor, which connects important neighborhood assets, and want to work with DOT and Parks to build on ongoing initiatives. In this section as well, we'll be talking through some new policy recommendations to guide public realm investments. An important goal is to facilitate the creation of new open space to serve the existing community and new populations expected as a result of anticipated growth. We're looking at ways to create new open space in underutilized areas as well as on city-owned properties. We are considering precedents that use existing city facilities such as schoolyards to serve the broader community during non-school hours. Thinking of ways in which zoning can be utilized to incentivize the creation of new open space through privately owned public spaces or the POPs zoning tool. And we also want to work with our partner agency DOT to explore ways to maximize open space through the street network, through programs such as the DOT Plaza program, where it may be feasible, or Open Streets, which accepts applications on a rolling basis. We also want to look at the needs in existing parks, not just new opportunities, and really work with the Parks Department on how we can inform future investments. We want to coordinate investments on existing open spaces, particularly those in close proximity to the NYCHA communities. Identify and catalog unmet needs and specific improvements that could be made to existing parks, for example, replacement of turf fields or play areas. And also want to engage in an advanced planning effort with Parks Department to inform private redevelopment proposals and any future environmental review or technical analyses that they would need to undertake. We are also looking at how to prioritize investments to connect these open spaces through a safe and vibrant street network. prioritizing pedestrian enhancements that address accessibility needs of users with varying ages, abilities, thinking about school routes and the needs of parents with strollers and things like that, accessing parks and other neighborhood amenities, identifying opportunities for streetscape improvements, particularly in coordination with ongoing efforts by local organizations. Here we have the example of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnerships Public Realm Toolkit, which was implemented as part of the 11 White development, supporting public art and cultural programming efforts by local business improvement districts and other organizations, and promoting opportunities for increasing tree cover throughout the neighborhood and opportunities for plantings and green infrastructure as well through our work with partner agencies. We are also looking to work with DOT to improve sidewalk infrastructure, particularly in areas that have constrained widths or safety concerns. Here again, we're citing the example of the Ashland Place Navy Street corridor. Downtown Brooklyn has excellent transit access, and it's really important to identify opportunities for streetscape enhancements, particularly around transit nodes and station entrances, improving bike infrastructure across the neighborhood, and improving wayfinding and signage to improve navigability and also create a more legible circulation network across the neighborhood. We also know that it's really important to anticipate and plan for future growth and really balance the needs of what's really an increasing mix of uses and users. So working with our partner agencies on that. We want to identify ways to balance vehicular and logistic needs of businesses, institutions, and residences, while also prioritizing pedestrian and bike safety, enhancing the streetscape and quality of life and sidewalk mobility issues through work with our partner agencies, evaluate current and future needs at anchor institutions to account for any campus-specific operational needs, be it sporting events, emergency or ambulance access, etc. And lastly, also looking at a really important aspect that influences the streetscape experience, which is ground floor uses. Through ongoing citywide efforts, we want to ensure a wider range of uses are allowed within mixed-use buildings. And we believe that increasing zoning flexibility to limit vacancies could really help promote and activate the streetscape, but also at key locations continue to require active uses and retail uses where that would be appropriate. The next topic is strengthening connections with NYCHA communities. This is also an overarching slide that we've shared previously, but as a reminder, we are working to identify physical and programmatic recommendations to better connect NYCHA communities with the Central Business District and really advance ideas from NYCHA-led planning efforts and participatory planning documents, such as the Connected Communities Guidebook and the Open Space Master Plan. So far, we've had 2 introductory meetings with resident leaders at Farragut, Ingersoll, and Whitman houses to solicit their input on planning needs for the larger neighborhood. And we expect to have more conversations in the coming months. We have incorporated a lot of the initial programmatic ideas that have come up as part of these conversations in these recommendations. Also want to note that a recurring theme was the importance of space for youth engagement and mental health support for primary school-age children and teens, as well as senior care. Here are some existing conditions near 3 NYCHA communities. We're looking at pedestrian mobility needs, opportunities to enhance access to and from neighboring community serving uses, such as schools, health clinics, and parks. We are coordinating with our partner agencies to better understand how we can bolster ongoing efforts and also think of additional investments that can be made in the future. And for example, looking at the portion of the BQE, the elevated portion, and thinking of connections to Commodore Barry Park and street improvements along the NYCHA campus perimeter. In addition, this is also something we shared previously, but just noting that DCP is working with DOT on an existing conditions analysis to create mid-block crossings where additional pedestrian crossings would be appropriate with the NYCHA campus superblocks. And here we have the example of an existing mid-block crossing near Farragut houses. We are working very closely with our partner agencies to monitor and evaluate current and future neighborhood needs. This includes infrastructure, transit, housing, public health, social services, and sustainability goals as well. We are working with the MTA on identifying station enhancement projects for the stations servicing the CBD. We're exploring opportunities to facilitate improvements through private sites via the recently adopted zoning for accessibility, a citywide text amendment. We are looking to work with the MTA on monitoring ridership of the Long Island Railroad scoot service with the recently opened Grand Central Madison service, and also want to support implementing the Atlantic ticket pilot as a permanent ticket option. This is the ticket that connects the LIRR with the local subway and bus network. We're keeping in mind and monitoring also the progress of the bus network redesign conversations, and we'll continue to closely coordinate on this other important mode of transit as well. We are working with our partner agencies such as SCA and DEP to continue to monitor existing needs in the neighborhood for infrastructure such as schools, utilities, sewer, and other types of utilities as well. As part of ongoing citywide efforts and future efforts that may follow, we also want to study potential land use changes for the special downtown Brooklyn district through the lens of supporting housing opportunities. The map to the right shows in orange 12 mandatory inclusionary housing projects that were approved in Community District 2. MIH is the city's strongest, most robust affordable housing tool that's currently available, and we want to explore opportunities for mapping MIH to support the creation of permanently income-restricted housing at additional sites in the neighborhood. We are also wanting to revisit and update Downtown Brooklyn's voluntary inclusionary housing program to really increase its effectiveness at producing affordable housing to help facilitate a more economically integrated and diverse neighborhood, and also other zoning incentives which may conflict with the use of the VIH program. We want to support ongoing policy reform efforts at the state level for the removal of the state's floor area residential cap of 12 FAR, and really understand how the proposed citywide City of Yes housing opportunity text amendment will create and unlock housing opportunities in the neighborhood, particularly income-restricted housing opportunities. We are also intending to work with our partner agencies to study redevelopment opportunities to facilitate affordable housing and address a range of affordable housing needs, including for low-income families, seniors, and formerly homeless individuals through our work with HPD. We also want to work with HPD to strengthen and preserve existing affordable housing units and explore opportunities and the role that HPD programs can play to deepen affordability levels. And given the growth of the institutional sector, also identifying the need for dorms, staff housing for students, workers, and researchers as well. The next topic is public health and social services. Again, as I mentioned during the NYCHA section, we did hear a lot from the NYCHA resident association leaders about the importance of bolstering the social services and community services network in the area. So that's something that we're really looking to do. We're citing the example of the Fort Greene Health Clinic again, and the importance of having these types of uses in transit-rich locations. So we want to continue to encourage that. We want to identify opportunities for facilitating new healthcare space as part of anticipated growth. Recently, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene released their mental health plan for New York City. So we want to continue to work with them to better understand the city's policy goals and how we can implement some of those objectives in downtown Brooklyn, and also expand access to fresh food through existing tools such as the Fresh program, which was actually recently expanded. The zoning incentive area was expanded to capture more parts of the greater central business district. And this is one of the last few slides. I'll try to get through this quickly. Sustainability is also a really important goal. We want to support city-led efforts that advance the local laws 92, 94, and 97. This has to do with green roofs, solar, and reducing emissions. We currently have a citywide text amendment proposal, City of Yes Carbon Neutrality, which will support some of these goals. And we want to look at the applicability in downtown Brooklyn and advance some of the neighborhood-specific goals. We also want to support transit-oriented development and really leverage downtown Brooklyn's exceptional transit access and really help reduce car ownership rates, vehicle miles traveled, and emissions as well. We are, in this slide, including some examples of economic development-centric projects. And this is something that we will need to continue to work with our partner agencies on, which is through programmatic investments and also space of new physical space for jobs, really strengthening and expanding access to good paying jobs and growing sectors in the central business district. Here we have the examples such as the STEAM Center, which is a successful model for training and internships, particularly for adults and youth. We also want to look at existing community programming that is already happening at these anchor campuses. We have some recent examples here, but also want to find ways to strengthen these efforts and identify new programs. We want to work with NYCHA Health Initiatives to look at ways in which these medical institutions can expand community programming and with a focus on health equity for Farragut, Ingersoll, and Whitman residents, and also create new non-residential space for the creation of new jobs as well. This is just a quick reminder of the timeline. We've met with CB2 2 times so far, and we're excited to be here today to continue the discussion in advance of our CPC meeting milestone. The CPC meeting is planned for March 27th. And as Alex mentioned at the beginning, we really expect to come back and continue these conversations and provide periodic updates as well. So in terms of next steps, we have a couple of initial thoughts. First, with the 2 private institutions, we are hoping to continue engaging them on their work plans and figuring out the timeline for their campus redevelopment proposals. On the zoning and land use side of things, the immediate next step is really coordinating with the ongoing city-wide text amendments to support implementation of housing, economic development, and sustainability priorities specific to the neighborhood. We also want to further evaluate and explore opportunities for land use changes for the special downtown Brooklyn district with the focus on MIH and DIH. We expect to continue coordination with our partner agencies to advance all of these ideas, particularly the ones concerning city-owned sites. And we want to identify ways to implement both short-term, long-term projects and advance both place-based and programmatic project recommendations that are coming out of this effort. And of course, we want to continue to coordinate with you all and share out our progress on a regular basis as well. And that concludes my presentation. And I'm going to unshare my screen now, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amish. Do any of you in city planning know what Brooklyn Hospital is currently building? Right now, there's a new building going up closer almost to the Willoughby side of the, I guess, their campus or their center, right on Ashland Place. I'm sure you're aware of it. Do you know what their goal is or what they're going to do with that building?
Sure. I apologize for not answering that question as part of the presentation, but our understanding is that it's an as-of-right proposal. They're developing a residential building under the R6 zoning on the corner of that property.
I guess residential for their staff, I guess. Or just
Unclear.
residential.
Residential,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, just residential. Okay.
That's right.
All right. Are there any questions from our board members and committee members? I guess probably the easiest way to do it's just yeah, we got the hands up function. Yeah, these are first for board members and committee members. Okay, I mean, make sure I have them correctly now. These are for the board members, committee members. First, Ms. Ali. You're up. Ms. Ali.
Yeah, sorry about that. There was one of the slide you showed a street access from Willoughby to DeKalb on the border of the park and somewhere a little bit closer to Flatbush. Was there enough land and space that the city owned that you could open a street between the park and the properties that it abuts?
Sure, I can answer that question. So by connection, we don't necessarily mean just a traditional street. It could also be through private property. It's just the idea of creating additional access points. These are large superblock campuses, so we meant to say physical connection. It could be a traditional street or not. That would depend on their exact site planning considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next I have on my screen, I'm going by how I see it on my screen, is Monique Cumberbatch.
Good evening. I am a member of Kingsview Homes Cooperative. I am the vice president on the board, and I would greatly appreciate if we were included in community engagement for these projects. We are located on Ashland. Our cooperative is also adjacent to Willoughby, Myrtle Avenue, and St. Edward's Place. Currently, as you mentioned, there is a residential building going up. Actually, there will be 2 residential buildings on Willoughby and St. Edward's at 240 Willoughby Street. That is currently going to be, the new building is going to be 30 stories high, and that is going to create shading on Fort Greene Park. So I definitely am interested in knowing with future projects, because there was no community engagement for that project. I understand that that is under a developer, so not under your purview, but we definitely want to be included in community engagement on anything that is going to be happening in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. And on any DCP related outreach, we're more than happy to reach out to you to share out on our work. But as you noted, that particular development is as of right, so they're developing under the existing rules. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Next on my screen is Bill Flournoy. You're on,
Thank
Bill.
you, Chair Gordon. Yeah, I'm here. Don't worry. Yeah, hi. I was out of pocket for the first 2 presentations, so I'm a little behind the flow of everything that's going on. I'm kind of curious about a couple of things. The initial footprint of what you're looking to do as far as going forward with the campus, is it just going to be limited to the campus? Because you're talking about the effect throughout the entire district. Could you answer that question? I'll have some follow-up questions after you answer that, so I have an idea what we're looking at.
Sure. So the land use and urban design principles, those were mostly focused on the 2 campuses, but in terms of planning needs, we're definitely looking at the broader geography. City-owned properties, we're looking at the broader geography. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. It's both scales.
Those scales, because one of the things I'm thinking about, I'm not sure if the committee's already brought that up or the board's brought that up, but before we had the upzoning back in 2004, okay, and a lot of things that we were looking for weren't done because no one had thought about it. Schools, things along those lines, the things that we need for any type of expansion that we saw as far as residential. If you're talking about additional residential, additional, for instance, you're talking about commercial space, retail space, office space, community use space. If you're going to be adding all of this also onto the district, there's issues as far as transportation, as far as schools, those things. Are you taking into consideration the fact that that we didn't have what we needed to begin with, and now you're adding more to it?
Alex,
As well as
can I ask you to-
Yeah,
transportation and
sure.
also
Sorry.
subways.
I'll jump
Yeah.
in. So to the first part of that question is we're actually doing this process far in advance of anything that would be considered environmental review, which usually accounts for that kind of work. We're actually starting with our sister agencies early to understand both what they're working on, what their like wish list and goals and priorities are within their own pipeline. And then we can use that to also understand how the growth of these two campuses and any other surrounding areas can be accommodated through that. I will say that what we call background growth, meaning the growth that is occurring outside of this area, will be inclusive of the greater downtown Brooklyn area and will pick up the 2004 rezoning geography of the CBD. So we will be thinking through not only what these campuses themselves could generate, but all of the growth that's been going on and continues to go on in the surrounding neighborhoods. And that's 100% going to be part of our thought process. We don't see this as being initiatives that only support these two campuses. It has to support all of the surrounding neighborhoods that have seen growth and that haven't. And I think that's part of the point of this, is we're trying to make sure that we're taking a little bit of a broader and more holistic view this far early in advance. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Chair Gordon, may I have a follow-up question?
Okay, only because I want to get moving on to other people. Okay, one more, Bill.
Okay. Have you also talked to the business improvement districts in the area also, because they're going to also be impacted and they may also have some input to give you?
Thank you for that feedback. Not yet, but we can certainly have additional conversations.
I'll have follow-up later, but I'll let the other committee members speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay, next I have on my screen Yvette Richardson. Yvette, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions too, probably not too involved like Bill's. The connections that were discussed in this presentation, kind of a follow-up to Ms. Ali's inquiry, are those intended to be pedestrian or vehicular, or can you just expand on that a little?
Sure. So at this stage in the process, what we're really talking about is the principle of really breaking down what are currently large super blocks. But in terms of whether it would be pedestrian or vehicular, depends on how these developments would place their buildings and operational needs and those types of considerations. So it could be a combination, it could be one or the other, but it seems a little bit early in the process for us to kind of dictate that. So we're just talking about the overall principle of connectivity right now.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that helps answer.
Two more little questions, Chair, if I may.
Okay, all right, make them quick.
Yeah, they're very quick. As far as timeline for implementation of this framework, do you have like an idea? We're looking like a 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 50-year plan?
Unfortunately, we don't have a clear timeline. As we noted, there's a number of variables. We're hoping to flesh this out a little bit more over the coming months. And as we get more clarity, we are happy to report back.
Okay. And then my final question is, you mentioned a presentation on the 27th. So how does that work? Because I think you are city planning, but you said you have a presentation to city planning. So
that's right.
If you could explain that a little.
Of City Planning, of course. So we're the Department of City Planning, but the City Planning Commission, the body of formal sort of commissioners, they meet periodically, and we call this a review session. These are set meetings that happen, and we are using one of those meetings. They're public meetings. They're streamed live on YouTube. So we're using that forum to share with the City Planning Commission our recommendations, so we can also get their feedback as well. I don't know, Alex, if you wanted to add to that.
Just, yeah, the City Planning Commission is technically a separate body from the Department of City Planning. And so we are the civil servants that help support and advise the City Planning Commission processes. And so we're basically presenting to them, and those are all appointed individuals.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next I have on my screen is Daughtry Christopher, our co-chair.
Thank you, Carlton. I want to thank the DCP for this pretty aggressive plan. It's kind of the inverse of the Atlantic Avenue mixed use plan, which the steering committee that I'm on, both of which are trying to bring in these more thoughtful, more community-based strategies for better planning. So I appreciate that. I have a million questions, but I'm just going to stick with one for tonight. We know that we're in a housing crisis. And we know that although MIH and VIH are the most effective tools currently for generating affordable housing, we also know two things. One, affordable housing isn't affordable. And two, the MIH and VIH tools don't generate enough of it. So my question for you is, how is this plan going to change that?
Alex, can I request?
Sure.
you
Yeah.
respond?
I'll jump in first. So I think it's a fair point, and that's something we recognized. I know there's been a lot of discussion about 421A, which is a tax credit that is heavily utilized across the city, but it's since expired. A lot of the affordable housing has been generated in the city. If you hop on to like Housing Connect, for example, you'll see super high rental rates and really high incomes for relatively small apartments. And so what I want to point out is that currently doesn't exist. That does two things. One thing is it's a much higher area median income, means the rental amounts than are set within either voluntary inclusionary housing or mandatory inclusionary housing. So I think there will be or have to be an adjustment to that. The second thing is we're actually, without that tax credit program, we're kind of in a little bit of a limbo right now. The MIH and VIH program, and apologies for all the acronyms, that's mandatory inclusionary housing and voluntary inclusionary housing, are reliant on not just zoning incentives and requirements, but a commensurate tax credit program. So it's not even just a question about whether the zoning tools will be enough, but will there be another tax program available to support that? I think I just want to be frank that without a new tax credit program, it's highly unlikely that even MIH and VIH work. And so I just want to put that out there. We can have, HPD has their entire kind of pipeline of projects to subsidize affordable housing through their capital planning program, and we will continue to work with HPD on that. But we're in a little bit of a holding pattern with the tax credit program, which is out of our hands at the city. That's really a state initiative. I will say that whenever or if ever that program comes back, we will be looking at how to adjust area median incomes, recognizing that currently they're pretty high, and especially as incomes rise in the city, it raises the entire kind of AMI levels that everybody has to adjust to. And then finally, the one last thing I want to add is right now there is no mandatory inclusionary housing or voluntary inclusionary housing anywhere basically east of Flatbush Avenue and Fort Greene Park. And so all of the developments that are basically going on have no kind of incentive or requirement. And so I think part of that is we'll look for ways to map that across the R6 geographies. But as Amrita mentioned, we also want to take a look at the downtown Brooklyn Central Business District, which is west of Flatbush Avenue, which was actually zoned before we had even voluntary inclusionary housing. And so I think that's another thing that we can take a look at to really ensure that we're getting a larger number of kind of sites to develop on the private property side. And I know I said finally, but one final thing, there's also city-owned sites, which we'll be looking at with our partner agencies. And those are really areas where we can really lean into both a lot more affordable housing and deeper affordability. And that's what we're going to try and prioritize on those sites and accommodate all of the other kind of community facility uses that Amrita talked about. So, it's going to be a site-by-site look at what's available. I recognize that you hop on Housing Connect and it's super high AMIs. I think we're going to be looking at that as well. But this has to be holistic in the sense that it's going to be area-wide, it's going to be site-specific, and we're going to be working with our sister agencies like HPD to really deepen the affordability on publicly owned sites.
Okay, thank you. Next I have my neighbor, sort of favorite, Douglas Butner.
Hi, thank you, Chairperson Gordon. I appreciate the opportunity. Hi, everyone. So In addition to my role on Community Board 2, I'm also the president of the Board of Directors of the University Towers Apartment Corporation, the large co-op that exists along Willoughby from Ashland to Fleet. So we're a pretty large, constituent. And I'd like to mirror Ms. Cumberbatch's comments about being involved in the process. And I'm sure we will be. But I just want to mirror that. We too are a middle income working class community. And we have lots of residents, thousands through 3 buildings that would benefit from that conversation. But 2 quick questions and points. As your presentation showed, there was recent development on the LIU campus right across the street on the south side of Willoughby. From Ashland, a little bit toward Flatbush by RXR as part of the LIU's partnership with RXR. There was very little streetscape work done as part of that, which we found extremely disappointing. So I assume part of this process is to address shortcomings such as that. Because if anyone walks from Fleet Place down to Ashland on the south side of Willoughby, you would be shocked at how barren that is, especially when millions of dollars went into a high-rise residential building charging $4,000 a month in rent. So it's actually shocking that the streetscape there was lacking as part of that development. And it really was a missed opportunity. So I want to just mirror that and hope that this process will address that. And I think that's probably a reason why. And I'm hoping that it can still be addressed even without this process. The second point that I wanted to make is I just want to know a little bit more about how access between Willoughby to DeKalb would happen through the LIU campus. How does that work? Is it private property? Does the city have that power to dictate and mandate creating a public access walkway from Willoughby to DeKalb through LIU property, which is currently fenced? And I'm just curious how that works. Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Thank you for those comments. I first want to note that for the streetscape improvements, absolutely, that is something we're looking into, and want to work with local organizations such as the partnership who are doing some tactical urbanism type interventions as well after the fact. So that's something that we will certainly look at. In terms of the publicly accessible connection, it's really this overall principle, again, as I noted earlier, about breaking up the block. The exact mechanism is not known at this time, and it's something that we will need to kind of engage the institution on and try to facilitate through our future work with them. So don't have the best answer at the moment, but it could be, it can be figured out down the line.
Just
Alex,
a quick follow-up. If they oppose that, is there recourse from the city? Because it's private property.
Sure, Alex, are you?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add to what Amrita was saying, that what this is laying out are the goals that we're trying to set forth. And as she mentioned in the beginning, hopefully it's a tool that not only us, but everybody here can help advocate for as well. Again, it is private property, but eventually at the end of the day, there's going to be a large set of actions, whether that's privately led or city led. And I think there's an opportunity to think through how a modern kind of contemporary urban campus connects with the surrounding neighborhood. And that's something that we really, really want to hammer home. That's important for us as we went through this process to put out there. So the short answer is no, we haven't identified the tools for it, but it's definitely one of our top priorities.
So you're saying leverage. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, and the last person is Denise Peterson. I'll just state that for the others who are not in the board, and Bill, I'm gonna have to ask to throw yours into anybody else we're gonna do into the community forum pot, so to speak, later on in the meeting. So I really want to get moving on to the rest. We have a couple, well, at least we have a LPC that I want to get going on. So last person on this pot is Denise Peterson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carlton, and good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. And so unfortunately, I came on a little late, and this is going to be one of my one of the committees that I'm going to follow as it relates to this subject matter. But what I just want to quickly say is, when I think about development or framework plan for development, the possibility of development of anything in this downtown Brooklyn area in particular, I think about some of the things that have been promised over time with certain development that had not necessarily come through for the community, as in what was spoken about, housing that should be affordable. I like to put it that way versus saying affordable housing, housing that must be affordable. The more we continue to leave people behind from that which is developed in the downtown Brooklyn, it becomes to be a different definition, and it shows what the bottom line interest is into whom that interest is in. I'm hoping that there is a very serious and effective outreach to neighboring communities to be a part of these conversations as they continue to move forward. I'm hoping that those conversations for such planning and development would not only involve housing that is affordable, include housing that is affordable, but that it should also involve jobs. There are so many developments that seem to go up in the downtown Brooklyn area, and those who are impacted by non-employment or being unemployed, does not seem that they have are given opportunities to participate in any development whereby they can have some earning through the work. And I hope that, and I will be asking this question, and I will be inquiring over and over and over and over again about that fact, because inclusivity makes a difference for everyone. And so I'm looking forward to all of the meetings, and I hope that I will be able to make all of the meetings that is around this subject matter. And I thank you so much. And let's see where we go.
Okay, thank you, Denise. You're always welcome to come to the Landmark Land Use Committees meetings. So as I said, I'm going to stop now only because we really want to get moving on some of our other items.
Mr. Gordon?
Yeah.
Mr. Gordon, point of order.
Yeah.
I recommend, particularly as there are so few public hands raised, and in respect for our DCP, which they have extended their daytime already. I recommend that we take public comments now.
Okay, let's, you have one, okay, one minute each for the public comment. Bill, can I?
Mr. Gordon, they have
2
minutes each.
Okay. I see Rosamond Fletcher.
Yes, thank you. I was informed by Taya that as a community partner, I can have a little bit longer. I'd like to make a few comments on this. So thank you, Chair Gordon, Vice Chair Karstoffen, and members of the CB2 Land Use Committee. My name is Rosamond Fletcher. I'm Executive Director of the Fort Greene Park Conservancy. I'd like to acknowledge the many members of our board and staff who are here tonight, in particular Joy Lynn Holder, if you can raise your hand, who's chair of our board. And any questions that you have for the Conservancy can be directed to Joyland and myself. Shakara will drop our contact info into the chat. So thanks for letting me speak, because this showing tonight is in great part to the Conservancy and community members coming out. Thank you for showing up, everyone. A special shout out to our friends at the Layout for getting the word out. As many of you know, the Conservancy has been taking care of Fort Greene Park in partnership with New York City Parks for 21 years. Over the last 3 years, we've built our capacity, tripling our staff and budget, which is now over $1 million a year in support of the park and community. We provide gardening and maintenance of the park by funding New York City Park staff positions, purchasing equipment like the new tractor, providing a discretionary budget for the park director, and running a number of volunteer programs. We also organize partner programs with community groups that celebrate the people and culture of Fort Greene. And we offer programs centered on environmental stewardship, like our Greene team, a paid learning opportunity for local teens. We do not typically issue advocacy positions, reserving our voice for projects and plans that immediately affect the park and adjacent communities. We know that the EDS and MEDS framework is not finished yet, and that the rezoning of the hospital property is not real yet, but we also know that too often the community is engaged too late in the game. We say that the time for community discussion is now. I'd like to thank City Planning for their service and support of the city and for all the interagency coordination work you've done. But we're here tonight to voice our opposition to the EDS and MEDS planning framework. We think the process and the framework are insufficient. The process is not transparent enough. It has no requirements for community engagement and participation. I know you're saying ULURP will eventually happen for the two projects, but why do we need two separate ULURP projects and a framework when we can have one city-led rezoning process? The framework presumes the rezoning and redevelopment of the Brooklyn Hospital Center and Long Island University campuses. And it begins to negotiate public and community benefits with no enforcement mechanisms. So we're saying that a city-led rezoning process would be better because it would at least require engagement with the broader community and it would link these three projects. And we say that the rezoning of these sites is not inevitable. The community should get answers to its questions first, and then we can talk through community benefits. So we respectfully, it's not a time yet.
Because I want to move on to the others. Yeah,
it's not a time yet. I had 5 minutes per Taya. I just let me get my request in here, please, respectfully. We would really like you to consider stop work on the framework and to get your heads together with Councilmember Hudson, Borough President Reynoso's office, and the full community board as to whether a city-led rezoning process is more appropriate. We plan to strongly oppose any future rezoning and development of the hospital center property that would cause irreparable harm to the park and community. Towers would shade the park, which would affect the health of the community and harm people living in the environmental justice area north of the park, and new market rate residential units would contribute to even larger deficiencies in green space in the area and widen existing gaps in housing. We know that open space is not green space. Everyone gravitates towards green space. I want to stress, we respect the hospital center and the work of its doctors, nurses, and staff. We are just opposed to their decision to proceed in developing and rezoning their property in a way that could negatively impact the park and community. So we have a lot of questions. I'll refer you to our website to look at those questions. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I hope others that are here tonight with questions about this will also have the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon, can you come off mute? Carlton, can you come off mute, please?
Okay, so he's not there. So I'm going to step in and just call on the next person. That's Vishnu Reddy.
Hello. Hi, my name is Vishnu. I'm a resident of Community District 2. First off, I want to thank the folks from DCP and the CB2 Land Use Committee for giving us your time this evening. I wanted to speak because I wanted to mention that I'd love to invite more neighbors into our area, not only to continue to do our part in addressing the region's housing crisis, but also to do it in a transit-rich area. So more of our region's housing growth can be less car dependent and more climate friendly. This is a high opportunity neighborhood with many institutions nearby. There's also a great park here, and I'd love to give more people the ability to access these great amenities and opportunities. I'm also in support of this plan being as permissive as possible, so as many subsidized units as possible can pencil out economically in these potential developments. And in addition to the subsidized units, we also need lots of market rate housing in the area. So there are units that are affordable to the middle class. Councilmember Ase, who represents a district very close to here, is struggling to find housing he can afford on a $150,000 salary. This is untenable and unsustainable, and we need to do something to address this. We need to address this crisis with the urgency it deserves. I'd love to see the DCP not only consider the impacts on current residents, but also consider residents who are priced out of the area who would love to live here if given the opportunity. Overall, I encourage the DCP to be very ambitious about this initiative, including being more permissive on massing and expanding the geographical scope so we can create more abundant housing options accessible at a variety of income levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlton, are you there? I see you. Is he frozen?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, you want to
I've been
continue
there.
or you want me to?
Yes, no, I don't know what. All right, next person I have is, and each one is 2 minutes for all these who wish to speak. Next one I have is Sabrina Zhang.
Yes. Hi. First of all, thank you for this presentation. I joined a bit late, so apologies if this has already been addressed. I just had a question. Considering the $50 million cut to the Parks Department, how do you see this affecting future plans for places like Fort Greene and Commodore Barry Park?
Sure, I can take the stab at answering, and then Alex, please jump in. So again, this is something that we will need to work closely with the Parks Department on to understand parks assets in the area and maintenance needs, not just for Fort Greene Park, but for open space assets throughout the district. So this is a conversation that is ongoing, and we hope to address it as we continue our work with parks.
Thank you, Zhang. Next I see Chloe Demovsky.
Hi, everyone. You did a good job. Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
Appreciate being allowed to speak. I'm new. I'm a resident. I am living at 1 Rockwell Place, which is on the corner of Rockwell and DeKalb. So I have a front row seat to all of this. And so I'm just curious of a couple of things. One is, if there is any consideration given to potential height restrictions, the density of towers. I'm not opposed to towers, but they're literally going up on every side of us. And so if they go up across the street too, then it's literally just a wall of towers and there will be no light at street level whatsoever. I also thank Rosamond for the comments about Fort Greene Park. It is a national treasure and it's already in crazy overuse. So if there's no consideration given to additional green spaces, not just open spaces, we have open spaces, they're not really used. Fort Greene Park is where everybody goes. So definitely we need additional park space in this neighborhood, light and air for everyone in the community to use and enjoy, freely available. I also, I saw some conversation around the Ashland Navy Street corridor, and I just want to highlight as well, being next to the hospital, I see all kinds of traffic challenges and problems with safety, road safety in that area. There are a lot of patients coming in, a lot of ambulances, and that whole area really needs to be considered before we add congestion, because I have seen so many near accidents that it is deeply concerning to me, that particular roadway. So thank you for this. You know, I'm open to a beautiful vision for the future, and I'm grateful for all of the comments being considered.
Thank you so much for the feedback, and I can answer the question around height that could come up. At this stage in the process, we have not necessarily thought about zoning tools such as height restrictions or gotten to that level of specificity. What we are saying is that we want to make sure future developments are thoughtfully designed, particularly the bases, how they relate to the street. And the overall height is, of course, informed by proposed densities. So this is something that we will need to better understand, and depending on the individual campuses' needs and their program requirements. We're not at that stage yet, as they're still fleshing out exactly what they want to do with their properties. So we can certainly follow up when we are further along in the process. Alex, anything to add there?
I'll just say one thing as an example. Amrita had showed on one of the site plans where there was, right now it's the surface parking lot for the hospital is actually on the super block with LIU. And just as an example to respond to that, one of the things we want to make sure doesn't happen is just large rows, blocks of towers. And so taking into site plan considerations where these two campuses can work together is something that we're trying to ensure would happen if there's development that moves forward on these two parcels, as one example. The last thing we want to do is just tower. We're trying to think through ways to ensure that there's lots of light and air, not only to the buildings themselves, but to the streets and the neighborhoods around it.
Thank you. Next, I see Tanya Richardson.
Hi, thank you. So piggybacking, thank you, Rosamond, and piggybacking off Chloe. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, who are the stakeholders that you speak to? Because I'm a resident of Farragut, and I'm a resident in the downtown area and a former member of CB2, because I wasn't involved in none of these conversations and didn't hear of anything, and I'm active in the community. And then another thing I wanted to say is, where with the building of all this housing is going to be more congested in that area on Rockwell Street, on DeKalb Avenue, which as a driver and as a person that just walked, it's hard to just get down to Bond Street with the congestion of the traffic and so forth. So the more you build, the more congested and traffic is going to be. And when was the conversations that you had with any NYCHA residents? The community definitely need to be involved. So I agree with Rosamond that I think, you know, it needs to be a full stop of your planning ahead, so other conversations can, and other residents and people in the community can be heard. That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you for the feedback and the question. The first question was about stakeholder outreach, and I can kind of answer that with the NYCHA communities. Our first step was to engage resident association leadership to better understand what would be the best way to engage the residents more broadly. And we are working on that, and we fully intend to broaden that conversation to engage all of the NYCHA residents as well. And we're really taking to heart the feedback from today about the neighboring constituents, and we will follow up when we're able to have more detailed conversations about this. On the point about traffic, again, this is something that from an infrastructure and services standpoint, we will be monitoring and studying with our partner agencies, and also through some of the technical analysis that will follow with any kind of anticipated growth that's planned for the area. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Bill Benoit coming up.
Thank you, Chair
In a
Gordon.
moment, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. As a committee member, I think I have more than a moment. Okay.
Right.
I was just kind of curious on the timeline that you're looking at, because you're currently presenting to the land use committee, but the other committees may also have input. So I was wondering, what's the timeline so that the other committees may actually have input also? Transportation, economic development, parks, recreation, you know, we all have different things that we can actually comment on, since those committees have specialized in those particular topics. So you're in front of us right now. You know, you're going to go to partners, check-ins, general vetting of ideas, draft. When can we actually, the committee members actually have opportunity to actually also give input to different committees?
Absolutely. The last time we tried to engage multiple committee chairs at the executive committee, we're happy to use whichever forum the board would see fit, either executive committee or general board. We're more than happy to come back to share and solicit feedback from other committees. So our immediate milestone, of course, is the City Planning Commission meeting. But after that, it's pretty open-ended, and we're happy to kind of work with what you would like us to do.
Okay, thank you. It's good to hear. And by the way, thank you very much, City Planning, for you coming out here in advance and, you know, doing the outreach. We do appreciate that, because this is a little bit different than usual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Peter Dowling.
Hi, thank you very much. And thanks for the presentation, DCP. I heard a lot about taking a thoughtful approach to the park, and you referenced kind of stepping up as you move from the park toward Flatbush and stepping down as you come through what is a kind of historic Brooklyn neighborhood with the park and everything that's around it. Today, that is sort of what it feels like, stepping up and stepping down. I fear that, a reasonable return on time investment and everything else that you guys are putting into this as far as development would have to mean towers, more than one. And we already have the one that's been pointed out that's a private development that's going up on Willoughby next to the park, flush with the park. Those are two new buildings. That feels like falling off a cliff, not stepping down into the park. That feels like, it's been strongly implied outside of these plans that show no specific buildings yet, that we can expect multiple buildings in the 20, 30, 40, 50 story variety. If you guys take into account the importance of the park and the views to the monument and everything you talk about in presentation, why are you doing this? I mean, why would you build buildings flush with the west wall of the park, knowing what happened to the botanical gardens when they tried to put developments around it? And they did the shade studies, and we saw that those plans were defeated. If your role is city planning, obviously the number one thing that you should be thinking about in a presentation like this is the importance of green spaces in a very dense and urban environment. And Brooklyn has so few, Fort Greene being, in Prospect Park, arguably being the two most important and largest. To me, it just seems unconscionable to approach this much development. We've seen downtown exploding, and to just sort of allow the creep to push all the way up to the literal wall of Fort Greene Park makes no sense to me as a resident. And I just don't hear enough about that being weighed in your decision-making process. And frankly, I think if it were weighed, in balance, it would probably indicate that this ought not to go through. Thanks.
I appreciate that. And I'll just note that one of the slides that Amrita showed is actually encouraging a setback which currently doesn't exist on the campus. Meaning there is a hatched area along the western edge of the park, which exists on all the other sides of the park. And so one of the goals here was to ensure, setting aside building heights and everything, that the first and foremost is that the campus, that new development would actually set back from the western edge of the park and create a western edge, whether that's for pedestrians or vehicles or whatever, a public street. That's first and foremost. The second is we're talking about a range of heights that could be accommodated. Again, these are 4 city blocks full of size. And so you have a lot of wiggle room in the kind of the sense of how much space you can provide for heights and setbacks and base heights and where the street walls come down to the sidewalk. So I think through this process is something that we'll take a look at what the appropriate densities can be, weigh the pros and cons of that, and what kind of resultant heights could be accommodated through those densities. That's part of why we're starting this process now, is to go through that.
Okay, thank you. Last person I have is from our committee is Ernest Augustus. Go ahead, Ernest.
I'm on. Okay.
Okay, you're on.
Okay. Just a simple observation with this plan. Developers build buildings. They don't build communities. The only thing that builds communities are not-for-profit churches and schools and so forth. I looked at a community called Long Island City. And you go there today and there's a wall of towers, just glass towers. My contractor moved into one of those towers, and within a year, he had 2 towers built in front of him that blocked out his view of the river, just blocked it out. It's almost uncontrollable. Department of City Planning, I understand that their mission is to further development. They don't further community development. We fought for, and at one time got it in 2007, a Fort Greene, Clinton Hill contextual rezoning. On the day that rezoning became legal, it was the same day or the same year that they began trying to undermine the Fort Greene contextual zoning. There's a building right now on Clinton Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. The contextual zoning came right down on that site. But they found a way to work with the zoning code to get around it. You know, it's and if you go on Fulton Street down to the corner of, and people are very familiar with it because of the Whole Food. On that corner of Fulton to Flatbush, you'll see nothing but towers on both sides of the street. I remember that we fought against, I think it was 570 Flatbush, and that got defeated, and the tower's going up. And then across the street, then they're going to have another 2 towers going up, and there is no quality of life. I think that I'm very suspect of this proposal. Yes, you have been disenfranchised. There have been no concerted outreach, because there isn't going to be a concerted outreach. What they do is that they present their PowerPoint and then ask you to tweak around the edges. I'm very concerned. This is overdeveloped. It's too dense, and the continued attempt to exploit the mass transit system. There's no limit. There's no control. So that's just my observation. The ULIP becomes just perfunctory. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. I see Kristen Condos. You got 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I've been a resident of Fort Greene, downtown Brooklyn for over 20 years now. I've lived immediately adjacent to Fort Greene Park and LIU at University Towers for over a decade, and on either side of the property that we're in discussion of for the past 10 years. One of my questions and concerns is regarding the existing small businesses in the neighborhood and the potential for the future. What I've seen, and I think we've all seen happen with all of the development of these new towers and the commercial spaces that are designed within them, is that many of these commercial spaces are very large, and they essentially wind up sitting vacant for a very long time. While we're appreciative of the curb cuts and the open space that we've discussed, it's not very helpful if they're sitting next to retail space that's just been vacant for many years, or that doesn't really accommodate the immediate needs of the neighborhood. So I'd like to ask, what, if any, consideration is being made to help support small business, specifically retail, because that's really what's made Fort Greene such a rich neighborhood. And we've seen so many changes over the years, but as many of these retailers and food and beverage businesses are changing, we're also seeing them being replaced by Bank of America, Starbucks, fast food, major retailers, and we're losing the charm and the character of this neighborhood that has brought all of us in our community together. So I'd like to understand what, if any, consideration has been taken, and if not, I'd like to ensure that we are able to do so that we're just not full of big box retailers going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that feedback. I just wanted to point out 2 things. One is an active, ongoing citywide text amendment initiative called Zoning for Economic Opportunity, which is dealing with exactly this question around how to increase zoning flexibility to help businesses grow and also remove restrictive regulations, which can result in vacancies and things of that nature. Also want to point out recently we adopted a text amendment along Myrtle Avenue. It was originally only required to be active retail uses, and there were challenges. There was one particular site, 86 Fleet Place, where they had vacancies for a long time. And we adopted a text amendment that expanded the list of allowable uses. And today it's occupied by the Brooklyn Cancer Center. So those are the types of, oh, great.
Yes.
So those are the types of flexible rules that we're hoping to look into and also encourage smaller scale retail and vibrancy at key locations as well.
May I just quickly add regarding that 86 Fleet Place location, because I live here and I've lived directly adjacent now for 20 years, that space has sat vacant for a very long time. And now the hospital use, the Brooklyn Cancer Center that is there is a mirrored wall that you have, it's an opaque mirrored wall that there's no interaction between the sidewalk and the community there. But there's also no landscaping. Immediately at the Ingersoll Community Houses is where the beautiful landscaping from Flatbush Avenue ends, and it just becomes stark and barren essentially from that point on. And that's specifically the kind of consideration I'd like to have going forward, is when we're looking at having educational and medical facilities or any kind of retail, essentially, there's, just having a flat opaque glass screen there is not really the level of interaction that you had discussed in your presentation in terms of design. So I'd like to make sure that's considered going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. And again, as noted in the principles that we are striving towards for these future developments, that's certainly an important consideration, transparency and activation at the street level. Thank you.
Last person I have is Emily Anadu from our board.
Thank you, Carlton. Appreciate the time. So a couple of things. So one, just to, I think, echo some of Kristen Condo's comments. Thank you very much for that. I've been a resident of the community now for 18, plus years. And unfortunately, even when there are these developments that have allegedly affordable housing, which we all know are not actually affordable, what ends up happening is that even if you carve out like 10 or 20% of the units for, again, allegedly affordable housing, businesses cater to the 80%. Businesses will cater to the 80 and 90%. And then what happens is that instead of people being able to buy $1 cup of coffee, the only coffee available to them is $6 or $7. The grocery stores change. You, instead of like Stop and Shops, you get whole paychecks. I'm sorry, I guess they're known as Whole Foods, but you get a whole paycheck. And so just, again, like hearing that there are these hopes and these aspirations and these dreams for what need to happen, hoping is not enough. What has happened to this neighborhood is, like, honestly, it's pretty disgusting. And this idea that, like, I get that there's amazing transit at the base of, at that corner. I get that people want to capitalize on that, but no regard is being made. And unfortunately, even this process where we have pointed out that, almost half of the residents of Fort Greene live in Walt Whitman, live in Ingersoll, live in Farragut. And so people say, well, if they wanted to, if they had its concern, they would be at these meetings. Being able to sit on this 2-hour plus meeting is a luxury and a privilege that most people don't have. We are extremely privileged to have the time to sit and do this. You are privileged to be sitting here presenting this plan. And I don't think that any real input is being gathered. It feels like a lot of boxes are being checked. So that is just one concern with this whole process. Second of all, the idea of to me, who would even want an 80 or 70 plus story tower? When, not if the next pandemic happens, do you really want to take 5 hours to get up to your apartment? It's ridiculous. The shade concerns also, I feel like are not being taken seriously. Also, I'm sorry, I love dogs, but I love humans way more than dogs. If even 10% of the residents of these new 3,000 plus housing units have dogs, that's adding an extra 300 dogs to Fort Greene Park, which is already untenable to be in before 9 in the morning, unless you literally want to get attacked by one of the 10 million dogs that's there. I just, frankly, this is all ridiculous to me. It is ridiculous. I am so for, and so I am actually, in addition to being board of CB2, I'm also the founder of the layout. Thank you, Rosamond, for the earlier shout out. Because even the layout was born out of a desire to return Fort Greene Park to what it used to be. When we used to be able to have Soul Summit every week and the new residents of Fort Greene were not complaining about the natives. No more othering, no more of that. Just no. This doesn't have to happen. None of this is inevitable. we will continue as a culture, as a community, if this does not happen. And so I also just want all of us to be conscious that this does not have to happen. Go somewhere else with this. Go somewhere else. I moved to Fort Greene and I bought in Fort Greene because there weren't high rises everywhere. I didn't buy in Fort Greene because I was like, ooh, this place has great bones. We just have to get the natives out. Just
Thank you, Emily.
stop. Thank you. I'll
Okay,
stop because I
thank
could
you.
keep going.
All
Thank
right. Okay. I don't know if Anitra, do you want to respond, or that's pretty much? All right, well, I think we had.
No,
a
sorry.
very
So
extensive-
specific question, Carlton, for them. What are they going to do about the increased number of dogs that this would be? Let's just deal with
Okay.
that. It's a very specific question.
Okay, if you can get that.
Sure.
All right, answer that. If you can answer that question, Anitra, then we got to move on.
Absolutely. So we also saw in the community district needs statement that dog parks was a very strong theme. It's something that we will work with the Parks Department on, and it's definitely on our radar. And we hope to accommodate this use in the future.
No, sorry, Carlton, I have to.
Yeah.
Dog parks cannot be funded with private funding. They have to be funded with public funds. So please tell me that even if there is more dog parks, please tell me if it's mental health issues do you think that not need to be taken care of, or what actual needs in the community do you think should be like subjugated to make sure that there are dog runs? Because to be clear, this is not again a hope. Dog runs cannot be funded privately. They would have to come from public funds. And there's nothing in me that thinks that like dog runs should be funded over like food insecurity, mental health issues, et cetera. Okay, and I promise.
Okay, Ms. Fletcher, you have one question. Okay, please answer the
Yeah, just
question.
thank you. Just circling back, I just want to know if we can get a commitment from city planning to talk to Crystal Hudson, to Councilmember Hudson, and also Borough President Reynoso regarding an alternative city-led rezoning process. That so instead of the 2 private rezonings with the framework, can we begin a more comprehensive rezoning process? Will you have that conversation with them?
Thank you for that statement, Ms. Fletcher. We can certainly look into that conversation and we'll follow up. We've definitely heard your point about this city-led rezoning approach, and we can contact the elected officials and have a conversation.
Great. Thank you for contacting them. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have stopped there. We spent almost an hour and a half on this one matter. We still have at least another matter to get to. So I want to stop there. Thank everybody. I'm sure we'll be dealing with this again, and there'll be further discussions on this. I'm sure it'll be calendared by the board office, and we'll be discussing this again in the future. Let's move on to the Landmark Preservation Commission Certificate of Appropriateness for 64 South Portland Avenue, which is in the Fort Greene Historic District. And they're asking basically for work on a facade, on a window at the facade, which is a new, I guess, a replacement window of aluminum. It's a 4x4. And it's been sent to us because the LPC staff is only able to deal with a 1x1. So basically, this is what we have is a request for a new window or new windows at this part. And if the presenter is still there, we'd like to hear from you.
Hi, yes, I am still here, and that's quite a tough act to follow on a little thing about like a few windows.
Yes.
So I'm also struggling through the first couple of days of COVID here, so I'll try to do my best to get through here.
Do the best you can. Thank you.
I will share my screen and bring up the drawings. And please confirm you can see the front elevator for the street view for South Portland.
Okay, we can see it now. Go ahead.
Great. So in the middle, 64 South Portland is currently, we're finishing up the interior renovation. At the last minute, the owners decided they wanted to redo the windows. The front windows were replaced at an earlier renovation, and they're really not very energy efficient. So we're proposing to replace those with aluminum 2/2s. The top 2 floors are already wood 2/2s. The bottom parlor floor is wood 4/4s. The whole thing would be 2/2s. It's actually kind of an interesting precedent for this one, in that, as you mentioned, staff is allowed to approve aluminum 1/1s, but not 2/2s. This house is almost identical to 308 Cumberland. It's in the same block and same neighborhood, and built in the same style within a year of each other. I'm going to talk about 308 Cumberland's review when they were presenting to the commissioners, replacing the front windows with aluminum. And these are aluminum clad, not necessarily just aluminum. So there's significant stylistic detail difference. The commissioners noted that a building of this size, of the time that it was built, would not have been built with 1/1s. They would have been built with 2/2s. The smaller panes of glass were less expensive and made the windows more affordable. So in that case, the commissioners actually spoke up and overrode the suggestion of 1/1s and suggested aluminum clad 2/2s. So we are essentially doing exactly the same thing. That is what was approved and what was installed. That commission hearing was in January of 2020. And that work has been completed. So basically what we are talking about is doing exactly the same work that was proposed and approved at 308 Cumberland. And we are hopeful that the same precedents will be applied here. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. How many windows are you going to be replacing, and can we see what the window would look like?
Sure. So all of the windows here, there are 268. And we have the existing the tax photos to show that at the time of the 1940 tax photos, they were 1/1s up above and 2/2s below, pretty much throughout the block. So clearly all of them had been renovated since they were built in the 1850s and changed to 1/1s. And then later on, again, comparing to what there is now, the more recent renovations have gone overwhelmingly to the 2/2s. So these are the details. So you can see on the left, the existing wood window details, and on the right, the clad, excuse me, aluminum clad details. The definition and size of the sashes and the muntins are consistent with the existing materials and consistent with what would be considered historically appropriate.
Okay, do we have any comments from committee members, board members?
Motion to approve as presented.
Okay,
second
do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. Any questions or comments on the motion? If there are none, I don't think we have Karen anymore. I just need a
Mr. Gordon, I can call the
roll.
roll for you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, go ahead.
This might be a little bit out of order. I have a different roster than Ms. Johnson does. Mr.
Fine,
Flanoy,
whatever, whatever works.
Mr. Flanoy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes to approve. We'll do Gordon and Karstoffen last. Ali, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes to approve. Augustus?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Williams? Cheryl Williams.
Cheryl Williams, yes.
Thank you so much. One moment. Johnson is absent. Richardson.
Yes.
Stanton. Judy Stanton.
No, I'm having terrible audio trouble, but yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Christopherson
Yes.
and Gordon.
Yes. So I come up with 9-0.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And Howell.
Yes.
Apologies.
Oh,
And you forgot me, it's Esther.
And Esther, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Esther.
You're fired, Tad. Just
I
kidding.
know.
Yes, I vote yes.
Thanks,
Okay,
y'all.
so we come up with 11. All right, 11 0. It's my count I have is 11-0-0 passing. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Hill, for presenting.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, good night. Next is my report. I just want to throw out a few items. I'm going to try to do them as quickly as I can because I thought these were items would be of interest. And let's see, now we have, this is from the New York Times of March 7, page A16. It's a very interesting article. It's something that Daughtry brought up like it's some months ago regarding and it said, well, the headline is City Shortage of Workers, Heritage Services, report says. Now, this report that they're referring to is from the Controller's office, and they were particularly concerned with the insufficient staffing of a number of agencies. Now, that how it would report, how it would affect city services. And the one that I think that affects, I guess affects us the most is the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. And what they said here was that, and I'll read this up, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, Office of Administration has met none of its targets and has a 17% vacancy rate. So this is one of the things that's been coming up is can HPD do its job with insufficient staff? And historically, HPD has been sort of like a place where sometimes City Hall decides, yes, we'll give them resources, and sometimes, no, they don't really need it. So that's something that affects the work that I think that we're trying to do here. One thing that also came up from the real estate section of March the 5th, and I'll read the headline. They call it Excuse After Excuse. Black and Latino developers struggle to expand. What it is that the Times counts approximately 112,000 real estate developers nationwide. The number of Black developers, real estate developers, is 475, according to the Times. According to the Times, 175 are Hispanic Latino developers. These are things that particularly the developers were concerned about because the low number of developers of color affects the possibilities of future development, not only for communities of interest, minority communities of interest. So this is something that I think that I wanted to bring up, just to bring it to an attention that this is still an ongoing problem. Another thing that came up to my attention was I attended one of these little Zoom conferences from the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, or some Greenwich Village in Manhattan. And they were doing a Zoom conference about a number of, or not the number, but why they're having insufficient, let's say, housing for people of need. And it turned out that they were doing the same thing that we did several months ago regarding AMI. They focused on the AMI almost exactly, it was a rerun of what we were doing. So they focused on the same situation as well as what we did. And yeah, there was, oh yes, there was one other thing that came up also that I heard. Now, I wasn't able to get the statistics, but one of the things and speaking of affordable housing, I just caught a little bit of it on the radio, the radio news, was that there was a concern about backlog of rent payments in current affordable housing units, that there are not enough, that the tenants themselves are having trouble paying their rent. Now, is it because of lack of employment, lack of income, insufficient income? I could not tell, but there seems to be that particular problem, and I just wanted to bring that up as well for your attention. Okay, now we're going to move on to community forum, which I had wanted to use to try to give any expanded discussion of what we did. We did a lot of discussion about the eds and meds area. Are there any other points that people wanted to make in this area or any other areas for people from not on the board or not on the committee? You have a couple of minutes each if you wish to go ahead. Okay, Daughtry, I guess Daughtry, so I'll jump over to Daughtry. I see you waving your hand.
I apologize. That was just a stretch. I have a lot of things to talk about, but I don't know if now is the time.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think we're really getting, this took longer than any of us had expected, but I think we got through a number of things. In fact, that slides into the new business. There's an opportunity right now for committee members and board members to put any other topics of new business or new things that should be addressed. Although we're getting a little late on this right now. This took a lot longer than I had expected.
I take it back. I do have something, if I may.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Daughtry.
You asked earlier about a quick update on the Atlantic Avenue mixed use project community planning process. There was to be an open house last Sunday, but for some reason the PS9, which is where the meetings have been taking place, was unable to host it kind of at the last minute. So it will be rescheduled, but I don't yet know when that might be. What's interesting about our conversation tonight and the conversation that's happening over that area is that over at the CB8 is that process started with CB8 years ago when they were examining the M-Crown rezoning and trying to facilitate development that would support those goals that were set by the community board and the land use committee there. And I feel like part of what maybe is happening with the eds and meds framework is that it is being put on top of us, right? So I wonder, you know, I think I heard several people speak to the need for community-based planning. So I would encourage, and I'm fully in support of that, obviously, I would encourage anyone who's interested and who can to keep an ear out for the community planning that's happening over in CB2 and CB8. It's mostly in CB8, but it's also in CB2. I will try to keep everyone apprised of that next open house and community planning session, but it has been pretty interesting thus far. And I think there's a lot of overlap with the conversation tonight. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Daughtry. Are there any other topics that wish to be brought forward? Now's your chance.
I have a topic. Not
Okay,
really.
go ahead, Yvette. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Yvette.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to give a quick update. I attended the AIA session yesterday regarding the BQE. It was extremely informative. Many people presented and talked about how there's been years and years and years of planning and competitions and people just proposing things to do with the BQE, especially that cantilever area, but the entire BQE, and nothing has been done. So it was very informative. It was actually, I was a little disappointed because I thought it was going to actually advance the conversation. And it was really most people just expressing their frustration of why hasn't anything been done. So that's my update. I don't know if anyone else attended. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Yeah, I actually, because when I saw the thing about the developers, I thought, you're not a developer, but I still thought of you because I'm sure that that's an area that that you at least have stepped your foot in, or at least you've may have been involved with. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Last chance? I hear nobody else, we will to wrap up our meeting finally tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, seconded.
Seconded.
Thank you so much to community members for coming out tonight. It makes it so much better when you're here. I mean, no offense to my committee members.
Yeah.